I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to take a free version of the test because I really don't want to pay $12 per test. So I'm just going to do a cheap free one we found on this weird woo website too, which is kind of funny. It's called Eclectic Energies, and you can learn about chakras and acupressure. So these are the kind of communities that use this Enneagram test. Phoebe, would you like to take it first, or would you like me to take it first?
I'll go first.
Okay, so this test has pages with 9 questions or less, 1 for each Enneagram type. You'll get less questions per page after having answered enough questions to establish which types you are not. So I guess you answer the questions and it'll like remove the types that you did not answer correctly for, and it'll narrow it down until you get your type, I guess. So getting accurate results from these Enneagram tests, it is important to answer the questions honestly. Try not to answer them in terms of how you would like to see yourself, but in terms of how you actually are or have tended to be in the past. Those are 2 very different things, aren't they, Phoebe?
They most certainly are. Having been, just a little bit of background about me, having been somebody who was an ethno-nationalist for about half a decade, I'm most certainly not that person today. Having been somebody who was a very religious person for about 30 years, I'm not that person today. And being trans will inevitably and undoubtedly mean that I'm not the person I was before I transitioned to the person I am today. But also, it talks about how you want to perceive yourself and how you're actually perceived. And they can align and they can diverge. And people can perceive you in different ways. But I will perceive myself in a different way than Ben will perceive me. And I will perceive Ben in a different way to other people. And there'll be a number of factors in that. So what they're saying there is, don't be a wanker on the test.
Well, also, it's of course, it's trying to get you to remove as much bias as you can and to go with who you actually are versus how you want to be. But there's a problem in that too, because you don't know yourself perfectly. Like you're saying, you don't have 100% self-awareness. So you might think you're very charismatic, or you might think that you have certain personality traits that you might not actually have, just because you're only seeing yourself from your own bias. You don't know what you don't know about yourself.
The argument, the famous line is, from Donald Trump, so we have things that we know, things that we know that we don't know, and things that we don't know that we don't know. He got ridiculed for that, but that is one of the most accurate statements ever said by any person in human history, because it is true. I know I'm sat here with Ben. I don't know what the result of this test is going to be. And I can't tell you what's going to happen in 3 days' time, because that's an unknown unknown. The test is a known unknown, and the known known is I'm sat here with Ben.
Yeah. So it just doesn't factor in the variables. It's a very subjective thing, and so you can't really take this as objective truth, no matter what the result is, because I'm answering it from a limited standpoint. So I think let's just get into this thing. So yeah, because
are we doing the classical one or the one with instinctual variant?
We're gonna do the classical one and then see how it is. If there's an energy healing type, okay. Well, we'll get into all. We'll get into all that. This just sounds like
that does sound like woo to start with. That really does.
I mean, this is on a page called Eclectic Energies, so it can't really be that scientific.
I do like at the top. It's got chakras, acupuncture, exercises, etc., I-Ching, processing, etc., etc.
Yeah, so this will be great. Let's take this test for Phoebe, and then we'll take it for me. Okay. So at least there's kind of a spectrum, but it's still very like binary answers in that it doesn't give you context for any of these.
So it says, honestly grade each statement, yes, for yes, this really gets me. Partly for this is partly how I am, and no, this personality is not how I am. If you do not know whether it applies, usually best to check no. And on the screen, no has been pre-checked all the way down.
And so it does not give context for any of these situations. No context.
So the first question says, success, prestige, recognition really matter to me. I've yet to meet a human being where those things don't actually matter to them.
Right?
So the answer has to be a yes to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have yet to find somebody that says, I want to fail, I want to be unrecognised, and I want nothing of any note ever. I've never encountered a person like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, question number 2. What is your answer?
It's my job.
I love to take care of people and I'm good at it.
I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise. It's like you as a doctor, me as a social worker. We wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't genuinely believe that statement to be 100% true.
Question number 3 is just like, this is not a personality. This is not a personality trait.
Now, here's the thing. I have clinical depression. So, I don't get depressed easily. I just get depressed.
Yeah, like, it's not a personality trait. It's a clinical diagnosis.
Yeah. So, for that one, I'm going to have to say no, because it's not something that happens easily. It just happens. I am more selective than most people. Sometimes the world just seems too harsh. Well, again, that is a general statement that could apply to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So for that one, I'm going to throw the test a little bit and put partly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it depends on context and it depends on the situation, right?
I tend to trust most people. In a religious context? Absolutely not. If I was in a religious context, no way. I would be very skeptical of the lot of you. You've got to earn that trust. I've had my trust with religious people broken a lot. Not to say I can't trust you or won't trust you. It's just I'm going to be a bit, hang on a sec. But that's not to say that I can't and won't. I trust most people who play football against me on a Sunday not to be the people that are going to want to put me in hospital. Yeah, I can get behind that. So I tend to trust most people is one of those statements. Again, as we said, it needs some context. So again, partly has to be the answer here because I can't say yes and I can't say no.
All right. I want to win the approval of those in authority, sometimes even when I don't really like them.
Go on, ego, take over on this one.
All right, Phoebe Z, go.
The answer is, well, of course I do. I'm the ego that wants to be approved by everybody. I don't care who you are. I want approval. I want love.
Again, I feel like this is something that applies to everybody. I think everybody has these desires, and it depends on context of which authority you're talking about. Sure, most people might be like, yeah, I don't really trust the government authority right now, but we each have authorities in our own lives who, like, we probably want their approval from, like our boss or our parents. Somebody who's been put in charge of us is probably has meaningful input in our lives, at least according to our own brains. Like, we desire feedback, we desire love and attention. So this is not unusual.
You mentioned parents and bosses. We see those as voluntary, or we see those as beneficial, which is why we tend to want the approval of them more.
Mm-hmm.
Parents, because they have a bond of love between you, which is hardwired into the brain. I'm not going to tread on people's toes here. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have psychological training, but I do understand how that bond works. So you're more likely to trust your parents. Your boss at work, you want their approval even if you can't stand them, because that person can determine A, whether you get a promotion, B, whether you get a pay rise, C, whether you get disciplined, E, whether you're made, D, whether you're made redundant, etc., etc. So you have a benefit out of that. When it comes to the government, some people see that as only a negative interaction. The government take money from you, the government impose rules on you, and the government do things to you. You don't see any of the benefits from the government. So you're more likely to be less trusting of them because you see them in a negative light doing things to you than you would be a parent that has done more positive things for you, which is why it is much more difficult to get people to criticize their parents than it is to get people to criticize the government. People, particularly in a democracy, are much more likely to criticize the government than they are their parents, because they've seen the government as this thing that they can, and it's socially acceptable to rally against and complain about, because the government takes money in taxes, the government imposes rules, the government can lock me up, etc. My parents give me money, my parents gave me a home, my parents fed me, etc., etc. So they were two polar opposites. Yet sometimes criticizing the government is not the right thing to do, and sometimes criticizing your parents is the right thing to do.
This is a really good point, Mac, and we're actually going to get into that. We're going to get into more about this test, but we got to take it first.
Yes,
so we'll get there.
And we need to make some progress on this.
Yeah, I plan the next adventure before the current one is finished.
Well, of course I do. It's called planning tomorrow.
I often refrain from acting as I'm afraid of being overwhelmed.
That's partly. That can happen in any situation to anybody, myself included, yourself included.
I'm too strict with myself and others. I feel like that's everybody.
Well, of course, but I don't really know what the question says, but yes.
All right. Next page. I could probably use a little more ambition.
We could all do that. So yes, I could always use more ambition.
I'm always aware of what needs to be corrected.
No one is. No one is ever always aware of what needs to be corrected. That's a psychological impossibility.
Yep. I'm pretty domineering, Phoebe.
Be my guest. Be my guest on your show.
Okay, what is your answer though? Are you domineering?
Yes. Yes, of course I'm domineering.
Phoebe's ego's in the room, of course.
It's pushing Ben's ego out the window. Get out. Get out.
In most close relationships, I give more than I take.
Partly. There'll be certain situations where you compromise and you have met your partner, and there'll be certain situations where your partner has met you. So partly.
Okay, this next question, though, is obviously from a very religious standpoint, because they're saying I'm skeptical, suspicious, and doubtful. Like, suspicion and doubt makes it sound like it's a bad thing.
And also, it lumps skeptical in there as well.
Exactly.
It makes questioning things to be a nonsense. But you should always question
yes.
things. Of course.
For you. Even though this is your test, but I'm going to say yes for you.
Now who's domineering?
Me. Well, I have to take my test too, so I'm probably going to answer yes on the domineering question as well.
Remember, you are a guest on your own show here.
Yeah, okay. Well, is it hard for you to put your feelings aside even to get a job done?
No. I have autism.
It's important to me that I be admired by others, and many people do admire me. That's again, it's something that applies to everybody.
Well, of course. The answer is yes.
Is that a yes? Okay.
It is a yes.
All right. I don't see much point in wallowing in negative emotions. When I begin to feel anxious, I tend to throw myself into distracting activities.
Well, partly. It depends on why.
And I mean, this is kind of poking again at like clinical psychology and like coping mechanisms. Like, that's not a personality. This
feels like it has undertones of Scientology to it.
Yeah, I think Mac in the chat was actually just saying that. Like, this sounds like it's getting you to a religious outcome, and we'll get to that because it's definitely there. It's definitely there. I'm uncomfortable when people want an emotional response from me.
No.
You're a social worker.
Of course. I'm not uncomfortable when people want it. Whether they get it is another matter entirely.
Fair enough. Next page. Your happiness and your feelings are your responsibility, not mine.
Well, partly. If you're being held hostage, then yes, it is your responsibility. If I am a social worker who has parental responsibility for you, then it is mine, not yours.
Context, people. It's easy for me to accept other people and they seem comfortable around me because I don't judge them.
No, everybody judges everybody, full stop, whether they like to admit it or not.
Yep. Even though it is frequently irrational, I sometimes worry whether people are talking about me behind my back.
Well, of course. Partly true. Because everybody worries about that. I am a true romantic. Well, I personally consider myself a true romantic, and am told by my fiancée that I'm a very romantic person. But whether that's a true romantic, I don't know. But I'm going to say yes, because...
No true Scotsman.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
But I am a true romantic, and you're not a true romantic.
Yes.
I don't mind taking a risk. I really like to beat the odds.
Well, of course, it makes you feel good. Why do people play the lottery?
So that's a yes or partly?
Of course it's a yes.
Okay. I avoid expressing strong emotions.
No. MathPig, are you in the chat?
Is MathPig in the chat? Oh, yeah.
Personal relationships are by far most important thing in my life. Well, no. My own self-survival is the most important thing in my life.
Same for everybody. Yep. Are you more organized than most?
Yes. Despite making tea and waiting for the tea to be made.
For better or worse, I compare myself to others to assess how I'm doing.
Yes. Everybody does this. You drive down the street. You are assessing your driving against other people. When you turn around and say, that person is a bad driver, you are instinctively saying, I am a better driver than that person.
Yeah.
When you turn around and say, oh, messed up there, you're instinctively saying, I'm a worse driver than the person in front of me, or next to me, or behind me, etc. What is this?
All right. I am quite unobtrusive and easy to get along with.
Partly.
Okay.
In this online sphere, I am told I'm quite easy to get along with. In court, nah, I'm a very difficult person to get along with.
Rules annoy me.
Partly.
Depends
Rules annoy everybody. If the rule is, don't murder me, I'm fine with that. If the rule says, don't steal my stuff, I'm fine with that. If the rule says, walk on this yellow line and only this yellow line for the next 15 minutes, that's going to annoy me.
All right. I get bored more easily than most people. I am always looking for new experiences.
Now, to anyone here who has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, could you please tell me what you think of that question specifically? We'll take it later, but I just want you specifically to give me your thoughts on that statement. Because it sounds like it's part of a DSM criteria.
It does. It really does. So what is your answer?
Well, partly. It depends on what the subject is. If you were to take me to watch Prokofiev, I'd love every second of it and I wouldn't get bored 1 second. If you were to take me underground in a cave, turn off all the lights and run away, of course I'm going to get bored.
Yeah. I want to observe and think without giving myself away before I go into action.
Partly. Sometimes on the football pitch, I want people to know that I'm charging at them.
While I'm very loyal myself, I frequently worry that others are not going to be loyal to me.
Well, again, that's partly because it depends on the person that you're interacting with.
Okay. Yeah. I am more loving than most people.
Well, not knowing most people, I have to put partly because some people I will be more loving than, some people I will be less loving than. It's a very, very odd question, that one.
I'm a good networker. I know how to make connections.
Yes, I'm on this stream with you.
Yeah. I am highly individualistic. Isn't everybody, though?
Yes, of course I am. I'm not a drone, I am not a clone, is one of the things that we like to espouse about ourselves. And of course, I'm British. The last one, you don't need my input for that one. You just know the answer. I'm British.
Yep. All right. Next page. I'm attuned to anything that might be dangerous, and I am security conscious.
We all are. So the answer is yes.
Safety is important. People are attracted to me because I impress them.
We like to think that, so the answer has to be yes.
Yep. I try to get closer to people by being generous with my time and energy.
Again, we like to think that, so the answer has to be yes.
Mm-hmm. I often resent it when I see people doing a slack job.
Again, we like to think this. We do. How many of you in the chat have said, that's a bit of shoddy workmanship? Oh, they've missed a bit over there. Oh, there's a typo there. The answer is, of course, yes.
Yeah. I am more temperamental than most, but it's because my feelings are so strong.
Again, the answer has to be yes, because if you answer any other thing than yes, there may be something more psychologically deep that you need to look into.
I go along with what others want unless I have a very strong desire of my own, which I usually don't.
Well, partly. If we're in a restaurant, it depends. If we're driving down the road and I'm not driving, I'm going to be fine with that. If we're choosing where to eat and I have an allergy to half the things on the menu...
Yeah. So I don't like commitment. Who wants to be locked into something, especially if something better presents itself?
The answer has to be no, I'm an engaged woman. So if I say yes to that, then I've got problems in my personal life.
I come on pretty strong and can sometimes intimidate people.
We all can. The answer for me is, of course I can. But here's the difference. I know I'm doing it, and I'm leaning into it at the moment.
Nobody likes to be intruded upon, but I hate it.
This question, I'm going to just take a couple of minutes here to rant. I'm just going to rant for a couple of minutes. This is one of the worst statements I've seen in the whole of this Enneagram so far. Nobody likes to be intruded. Well, of course nobody likes to be intruded. When was the last time you said to a thief, come on, come into my house, take what you like, and then run away? Of course you're going to hate that. You don't want to have your personal space violated. When you get stopped by a police officer and they start to search you, well, of course you're going to say, I don't like that intrusion and I hate it. When was the last time you said to a police officer, I'm hiding things from you, Mr. Police Officer. The illicit substances are in my left pocket and my purse. Please, please, I'm really liking that you're searching me for these things. This statement is one of the worst statements that I have seen in this entirety of this whole Enneagram, because it takes this person that is an unreasonable, unfathomable, unimaginable person that says, yes, please come and walk all over me. Yes, please come and take all my stuff. Yes, please come and do all of this bad stuff to me. I'm not talking about people who may have an adult bias towards these things being enjoyable for them. That is me getting around the YouTube algorithm to say certain things on this channel without getting Ben a strike. But, of course you're going to hate it. You don't want to be seen as someone that's taken advantage of. Why do people get divorced? Why do people leave people? Why do people get children that are put up for adoption? Because nobody likes to be intruded upon. I see this every day of my life.
This test looks like someone ate the DSM and then barfed.
I see this every day. I am that intruding person. Some people will accept my intrusion because it's about how I do it and how I sell it to them. Some people will tell me and swear at me to get stuffed. This is a question written by somebody that if you put no, or if you put partly, you do not understand A, the question, B, your role in society, or C, you may not have the maturity to understand how things are working. So you could be a child taking this. You could be somebody who has reduced mental capacity taking this. But other than that, if you are somebody that likes to be intruded upon, are you doing this outside of a context which adults like to do and adults like to pay money for?
Yeah, this question's terrible. All right, so let's do the next page.
Rant over.
I'm drawn to emotional intensity and I'm not afraid to explore the depths.
Yes. I am meticulous, tedious,
and
even
fastidious.
We were fighting over the questions now. Fight it.
Two strong egos in the same room, okay?
Okay, from now on, I'm just going to let you read the questions. My ego is going to take a step back and let the guest on this channel read the questions.
I'm meticulous and fastidious, even about details that other people find minor.
Well, yes, I have autism. It's one of my autistic obsessions.
I am competitive and ambitious, but I do not think of myself as cutthroat.
No, I am very cutthroat. I want that job. I want that job. There is one job available. I want that job. If you've ever applied for a job and you think you're going to get it and there's only one position, you're being cutthroat.
Yeah. When making a decision, I often ask myself, which option will yield the maximum enjoyment? Doesn't everyone do that, though?
Well, of course everyone does that. So the answer has to be yes.
If I'm not careful, I get too isolated from others. This sounds like DSM as well.
Partly. Sometimes the isolation can be the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when I was leaving ethno-nationalism, isolation from them was the goal.
I see life as a struggle that I intend to win.
Of course.
Who doesn't want to win at life? Sometimes I have overextended myself in trying to help people. Haven't we all, though?
Yes. Yes, we have.
Because we're all bad at boundaries. It's important to me to feel as though I belong. This is, again, for everybody. Everybody wants to belong.
The answer is yes. And I know this because I've been part of organised religion. 2 organised religions I've been part of. Been part of ethno-nationalism, and I was part of groups that were to do with that. And so well, the answer is yes. We all tend to try to find people who are of similar natures to us. Why do people reject the notion of communities of minorities? Because they're intimidated, because their own community doesn't overlap with that community. So why is it when you hear people say there is no such thing as a trans community, get so upset when the trans people say, well, there is a trans community of shared experiences and shared values, even if we're all individuals within that? Everybody likes to think they belong, and those people that are outside of that don't belong.
Do you tend to avoid conflict?
Absolutely not.
All right. To deal with the fear I always have, I am as nice and warm as possible towards everyone.
No.
I welcome a good fight as it clears the air.
Yes, it really does.
No one would ever call me selfish. Well, that's a lie.
I'm being selfish right now. This food that I'm about to consume is a selfish act.
Everyone's selfish. As they should be. There's an appropriate time to be selfish. And that's something, society loves to tell you that being selfish is bad. But there are plenty of reasons why being selfish is okay. This is why we have boundaries. Boundaries is an act of selfishness because it's saying that your health is important. And I'm responsible for my own boundaries and for my own health. And I need to be selfish sometimes. I need to take my own health into my own hands sometimes and tell people, you can't talk to me right now. Like, I don't want to see you. Like, and sometimes people are going to force their way into crossing those boundaries, but society would love to tell you that you're just being selfish and not letting people cross those boundaries. So being selfish is okay a lot of the time. Like, just don't be selfish to the point where you are hurting somebody else in the process of being selfish. Like, don't make someone else's life miserable to make yourself happy. Like, that's not okay. But for the most part, being selfish is fine.
But also, being selfish in this context that you just said, I have pushed my way in before, with you specifically. And that was me being selfish because I wanted to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a selfish act because I wanted to give the help, even though Ben was saying, look, go away. I knew something was not quite right, and I selfishly pushed my way in, even though Ben said, push, 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 push. And that can have consequences to a relationship, but it can also have consequences in a relationship if you sometimes don't do that. So sometimes being selfish is a necessity because I saw that Ben needed help, and Ben has shown that I've needed help, and in both contexts we've both told each other, clear off, and both of us have pushed through.
I don't tend to overcommit myself. I have a limited amount of time and energy.
I always overcommit myself.
You always overcommit. I know you do. It would be the worst thing to be seen by others as a loser.
Well, of course, I am not a loser. What do you think the Wheatus song "Teenage Dirtbag" is predicated around?
It's strange, but I think there's something beautiful about sadness.
Yes, sadness is gorgeous. It can be gorgeous.
It's really hard for me to save money as I tend to spend beyond my limits.
Partly. We can all go through phases of I like things, I dislike things.
I hold a tight rein on my temper.
No. And yes. So partly.
Partly. I'm a big procrastinator.
No.
Okay. Next page. I accumulate lots of knowledge to counteract my lack of self-confidence.
Everybody does that. The answer is yes.
I am more sentimental than others. How would you know if you are something like compared to the entire rest of humanity?
Am I more sentimental than the Dalai Lama?
Probably not.
Am I more sentimental than the Queen?
I don't know the Queen.
Well, there you go. The answer has to be partly, because there will be people that I will be more sentimental than and people that I will be less than sentimental than.
I want to be noticed, but it also makes me uncomfortable.
No, I want to be noticed, and I'm quite comfortable with being noticed.
I'm good at getting things done.
Yes.
I'm constantly on the lookout for things that might go wrong.
We all are. The answer is yes.
I think it's weak to back down from confrontation.
Partly.
Depends on context.
If my physical health and well-being is threatened, then yes. If I'm confronting somebody because they want to take away my fundamental right to exist, guess what? I'm not backing down.
I almost never lose control of myself.
Anybody who answers yes to that
has no self-awareness.
Yes, precisely.
If something doesn't go my way, I can find something beneficial about it.
We all can. Whether we choose to do so is a different matter.
Yeah. I'm a brainstormer. For every problem, I can think of 10 approaches to a solution.
We all can. The answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Most people don't know that I'm actually really sensitive, as I tend to conceal my emotions. You do not tend to conceal your emotions.
No, I conceal nothing.
It is important to me that I win the respect of others. I'm going to say yes.
Of course.
I know that that's enough of an everybody thing. I don't let it show, but if I'm with someone who is as unique as I am, I get a bit jealous.
Well, partly. Everybody has envy. Everybody has jealousy.
Change, whether to a new job or new school, makes me more anxious than it does most people. So basically asking if you have generalized anxiety.
Or autistic tendencies.
Yeah.
Which, as somebody who has been diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder, the answer has to be yes.
Others need my assistance much more than I need theirs. That is very not self-aware.
Well, chat, you know what my occupation is. How can I answer this in any other way other than partly? If somebody can come up with the definition of how I can answer it in any other way than partly, I will advise you to train to do my job.
I'm pretty tough. Phoebe is pretty tough. I'm going to say yes on your behalf.
Thank you.
I can't rest until the job is done.
Well, I do rest, but it's usually involuntary.
So what's your answer for this one?
Well, the answer has to be partly, because
Okay.
because I can sometimes rest until the job's done. But here's the thing with that: you have a deadline, you have a piece of work that needs to be done in 3 weeks' time. Of course, I can rest before that job is done. It's 3 weeks away. I have a job that needs to be done in 20 minutes. I'm not going to rest for those 20 minutes.
Yep. Context. All right, next page. I generally appear calm and even-tempered even when I'm under enormous strain.
Partly. Math pick.
I tend not to consider asking help from others, even from those I love.
Partly. There will be some things that I don't want anybody to know. And there'll be some things
I am
that
more dramatic
desperately
than
want.
most. I'm going to answer that as a yes.
See, some of these questions require someone else to answer them for you.
What would you say, though? What would you say, though?
Well, of course I am. I have done stage acting before. I have appeared on television before.
Like, you are a YouTuber. I have compulsion to do things the right way, even if it's not cost effective.
I'm on YouTube. It's not cost effective to be on YouTube.
This is absolutely not. It takes me quite a lot of time and effort to make important decisions, and I frequently second guess myself.
If you're not second guessing yourself, you are not conducting yourself in a critical thinking manner. The answer has to be yes.
Okay. I want to enjoy things, so I'm not very disciplined. Why are these mutually exclusive?
Well, the answer has to be partly. Because some things I want to enjoy myself, like sometimes I just want to eat more cake, and that's not being very disciplined. Sometimes I want to go on that 10K run, and that's very disciplined, but I'm going to enjoy every minute of that run.
Yeah, that's context. Like, these are not mutually exclusive. People see me as a warm and sympathetic person.
If people didn't see me as a warm and sympathetic person, I would have been kicked out of my profession a long time ago.
I've been told that I lack tact, but I think the important thing is to tell the truth.
Partly. Sometimes I'm not allowed to tell the truth.
All right, next page. We're almost done.
Just before we carry on, you must get that with that last question as well. You must get that with patient privacy.
Yeah, because we get situations where family might want to know something. Like, well, we don't get to tell everybody everything. Like, there has to be consent in place for who gets told what. So, sorry, some people don't get to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I generally don't like to stay at one task for very long. I get restless and want to move on to something else.
Depends what the task is.
Partly. My tendency is to tell people what's wrong and what they should do about it has sometimes annoyed them.
Again, partly, because some situations you won't do that, some situations you will do that.
Even if I don't have it all together, I'm at least going to seem to have it all together.
We all like to seem, on the surface, the duck on top of the water. Even if underneath we're going... So the answer is yes.
Okay. Life is about give and take, so giving love is the most important thing in my life.
Partly. I can give love to an abuser, but that's ridiculous.
It's not great. I tend to escape reality into a world of idealized fantasy.
We can all do that.
I think everyone does, though.
Partly. Do I tend to do it? I don't know.
People aren't often what they seem, so I can be really suspicious of their motives.
Yes. That is something
Absolutely.
that happens.
I have more energy and strength than most people. Again, with the most people thing.
It has to be partly. I have less energy than Usain Bolt. I have more energy than a newborn baby.
I'm not comfortable with self-revelation.
I am very comfortable with self-revelation. I'm doing a personality test on YouTube.
I'm really good with big picture, but I don't have much patience with detail work.
That has to be a partly because sometimes when you're doing future planning for yourself and you're looking 5-10 years down the time, that's big picture. When you're looking at what I'm going to have for dinner tonight, that, my friend, is minutiae.
I think best on my feet, so I tend to move into action before I've thought it through.
Again, context.
I'm proud of the fact that many people depend on me. I feel like you are proud of that.
Yes, I am.
I've been told I'm a perfectionist, and I suppose it's true.
Partly, again.
Sometimes I don't know what I'm feeling until I've had a chance to think about it. I mean, that's
Yes.
true for everybody.
Yeah, it's a generic, vague statement.
A lot of these are very vague. The
Like,
aesthetics
very
of my
generic.
surroundings have a strong influence on my mood. Again, same for everybody, though.
Well, yes, again, vague, generic statement that could apply to anybody. It's like reading astrology, this is.
Yeah. I tend to have mixed feelings about many people. Again, I'll do what it takes to be successful. Yeah, I mean, who
Again.
doesn't want to be successful?
And here's the thing, even if
Everybody
you
wants to be
say,
successful.
I'm not going to do that because it would be too much effort to be successful, you're then lowering what your outcome for success is.
Yeah. Okay, last 2 pages. And then when I do the test, I'm going to just like speed through it and go with like my intuitive answers and see what I get. I have a real sensitivity to how my presentation is affecting others, and I can alter it if I have to.
Partly.
I seldom compromise my principles.
If you compromise them, they're not principles.
So, are you going to say yes?
The answer is no, because if you compromise your principle, I seldom compromise my principle. Yes. See, the question is bizarrely worded there.
Yeah. I can easily imagine all the things that might go wrong as I have a really vivid imagination.
That's called life experience. So, yes.
It really bothers me when people don't say thank you.
I'm British.
I don't give a damn about morality, but I've got my own brand of integrity.
Don't understand that, but I'm going to put
They're
partly.
definitely doing an objective morality thing.
It feels very feels like Ayn Rand would question some of these things and go, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah, since most of us here don't really believe in objective morality, what would you say?
And the question is, are there moral absolutes? Is what that question is getting at. And I personally
Well, I
believe
think
that
it's assuming that there are moral absolutes, but it's whether or not you care about them. So it's forcing you to assume that there's moral absolutes.
I'm going to have to put partly because I don't really understand the question.
When I've arrived, the party starts. So that's a yes. I enjoy remembering the past, even if it's a bit melancholic.
We all do. The answer is yes. Why did people vote for Brexit?
While I value my close relationships, I often feel most myself when I am alone.
Again, partly. I do.
All right, last page. Last page, let's do it. I tend to either comply completely or to rebel. I mean,
partly.
that's like 2 extremes. When I really get involved in an intellectual problem that stimulates me, I tend to detach from my emotions.
But partly, you can get caught up in the moment.
I secretly fear deprivation and being without the nicer things of life.
Everybody does. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I wish people would take care of me for a change.
Everybody does. Yes.
Yep. Sometimes I'm too critical of others, but I'm much harder on myself than I am on others.
Everybody is, whether they like to admit it or not.
My life has been permeated by a sense of longing.
Everybody's is, whether they like to admit it or not.
I have strong physical appetites.
Everybody would like to think that they do. Whether you do or not is a ableist question.
Mm-hmm.
So the answer for me has to be yes, because I'm a sport mad fitness fanatic.
I'm good at motivating people. Yes, you are.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Come on.
Ready for your results. You are a type 3. Taking wings into, so there's a wing thing. You have like a secondary score. So you're a 3, wing 4. So remember that. Write that down, because we're gonna look at what that means. We can just go look at what that means for you before I take mine.
Why don't you do a screen capture of that?
Okay.
And then what we'll do afterwards is we'll side by side yours and mine.
Okay. So I'll do my quiz, and then we will.
You can buy it. You can pay money to buy your complete score.
Yeah, I guess you can. But on the actual thing, like, you have to buy the test too. So, so I'm just gonna speed through and see what I get.
I'm gonna talk because I can talk and I enjoy talking. So that test felt very, for me personally here, that test felt very much as though I could have been reading a fortune cookie throughout most of what was being presented to me. And I say that as somebody who is not dismissing fortune cookies or making any connotations about fortune cookies here. It's just the statements in them are astrology statements. They're statements that are generalized, vague, and can be very much fit anybody in any situation. It has a undertone and a feel of cold reading to me, where this sense of you are being genericized to be squished and squashed into this trait of how it's all done is very much how I'm getting the feeling of this. And we need to be very careful when we do things like that, because when you are presented with questions like this, even though the test itself says we want you to be you, etc., 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 what you're actually doing there is you are genericizing yourself, and you are no longer being you. And that is the problem here with this kind of personality test, is because it tries to capture you as part of a whole, it doesn't see nuances. It doesn't see individual quirks, individual issues, which is why when you take a test for a psychiatric diagnosis, for example, you have to have not seen the test before, and you have to not realize you're being tested. And this is one of the biggest issues that a lot of people who engage with psychiatry and psychiatrists, in my professional experience, end up with issues, because I, as a professional, can sometimes see that an individual is displaying traits that have warranted me making a referral. But then they have gone and looked up all of the things that they could potentially have that are issues with them. And then, therefore, they can't take the test, because they're then looking for a diagnosis, whether or not they're doing this looking for a diagnosis in a conscious or subconscious manner. Because it's the Heisenberg effect. The effect of observing a phenomenon affects the outcome of the phenomenon. And what that means is that unless you are having it done to you double blind, and potentially being done in such a way that you don't know about it, there are issues with consent there. There's issues with ethics there. Because is it acceptable to test people without their knowledge? Is it acceptable to conduct a test on somebody who doesn't know that they're being tested? And there are very good reasons why we have these kinds of consent models in place. I'm going to speak from a personal experience here. I went to see a therapist once, and a therapist did a technique on me called immersion. And for those of you who are unaware of the immersion technique, immersion is where you treat somebody for acute onset post-traumatic stress disorder by taking them back to the position that caused the traumatic event in the first place. Now, the problem that I have is when I went to see this therapist, I was not in the acute onset stage of post-traumatic stress disorder. I was in the late stage complex PTSD stage. And what that meant was that when I was taken back to that stage, it wasn't a beneficial experience for me. It was a regressive experience for me. And what that did to me was it caused me to want to go and engage in the destructive and negative behaviors that I had associated with my coping mechanisms for that post-traumatic event. And it put me back on therapy train. It put me back into third class where I was moving into second class. It's a very British analogy, I understand. But it does raise how much consent can you give to somebody to conduct a test like this so that you're not biasing the results, but how much consent should you be given because of the harm that can be caused by that test being conducted without your knowledge. So for me, I've had this test conducted to me. I would not recommend this therapist at all. I would find this therapist to be somebody that is, in my opinion, unfit to practice. And I found the technique and the test to be done in a way that was for shock value and not done in a way that was designed to meet a therapeutic outcome for me as a patient, but was a learning exercise for the therapist. And when you encounter people that are engaging in that kind of testing and treating of people, you have to have informed consent to prevent that from happening. So in the situation that I'm describing, the person should have said, I will be undertaking a range of psychiatric tests. These psychiatric tests may induce the following, and then listed some of them. And then at the end, other outcomes may be present depending on you as a person. But that was not done in this case, and there are reasons why these safeguards exist. Yes, we want to have people that are able to accurately take these tests. Yes, we want these tests to be accurate. I am not saying these tests are accurate in any way, shape, or form, but I'm trying my very best not to bias the good student doctor above us. But if we don't tell people what's being done to them, that is a violation of that person's autonomy. That is a violation of human decency when it comes to understanding and when it comes to good moral and ethical practice. I understand there'll be people in the chat that will disagree with that last statement because everybody will have a slightly differing set of moral and ethical values. That's just the nature of who we are. But it's recognizing that we have those individual nuances and have those differences and have those ways of understanding each other means that we will better be able to understand ourselves. What, in my opinion, most people who take a personality test are doing, unless they're doing it for a laugh and a giggle, or they're a bit drunk and they're taking it because they've had far too many, they want to learn a little bit more about themselves. They want to see, well, okay, where do I fit on this scale? And that scale can be something as simple as I want to know if I have tendencies to be an aggressive person, tendencies towards anger, or whether I'm a nice, light and airy fairy butterfly. Everybody wants to learn something about themselves, whether they like it or not, and whether they admit that to themselves or not. You will want to learn things about yourself, but you may not like what you learn. and therefore you may stop going down that path because it is a painful experience for you to actually find out about these things. So when somebody says, you need to sit down and learn about yourself because you're doing these things negatively, and then you react in a way which dismisses that, that is part of you rejecting learning about yourself. It doesn't mean you still don't want to learn about yourself. It's an overriding factor saying, I'm not prepared to go down this route because I don't like X. So it could be a painful experience, like a bereavement in your life that you're not ready to deal with yet. It could be another event. Or you could learn something about yourself from a birthday party where everybody gave you cake, jelly, and ice cream, and you had presents thrown at you, and you were down the bowling alley playing 10-pin bowling all afternoon. You could still learn something about yourself from that situation, and you will be quite happy to embrace the answers of what you're learning there. These personality tests should be taken, in my opinion, with a user guide of your mileage may and will vary. So, I have taken these tests. We're now going to compare our results. And they are, in my opinion, something that is not greatly scientifically reliable. It's a bit of fun.
Yes, your state of mind will change your answers. So it'd be interesting to take this test on a good day versus like a bad day versus, I don't know.
I would like to take this test
versus 5 years from now.
I would like to take this test today, perfectly, wonderfully this, and then potentially on one of my psychotropic prescription medications. See what the differences are.
All right, are we ready for my answers?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'm apparently a type 6 wing 5. So I'm going to